In this tutorial, this will be a workshop of where I'm going to show you how to take a simple prop, a file cabinet, model it all the way through. I'm going to show you how to UV it, and then I'm going to take it into Painter and texture it. So this is going to be the entire process from Maya modeling to UVing to Substance Painter texturing. And this is going to be entirely in real time. Nothing's going to be left out. There's going to be a lot of tips, a lot of workflow processes that I'm going to share with you. And as a bonus at the very end, I've also decided to put together a little scene using this file cabinet, the completed version, and create a small lit scene rendered in Maya with Redshift. And I'll show you what I did, what props I added, and just kind of to finish everything off within the context of an environment scene. A very small, simple one. I'll talk about what I did and how I set that up. So sit back, take a lot of notes, enjoy, and let's get started. Let's begin with some preliminary pre-planning work, and I'm going to show you what I've done. So first things first, you have to collect reference. After you know what you're going to model, you have to go out and collect as many references as you need to make sure you are modeling your object correctly. So I already have them collected, and what I like to do is create a master reference image. This is where I compile all the images onto one single sheet like so. There are many other softwares that organize your pictures for you, your images, but I like to do it the old school way, manually. And here's what I have. Just basically all the references I've collected of the file cabinet and some other props that I may want to create, and then that just placed on one single sheet. So that way I can just look through them and study my object. Next, let's talk about my scene. So I'm not going to insert all these objects and show you exactly what I did and how I did it. I'm just going to talk about what I have. So for every scene that I create and for every environment or prop that I model, I always insert a human scale reference. This is a simple box. Let me unlock it. This is a simple cube that is about 6 feet in height. And the dimensions for this cube are width at 50, depth at 50, and height is 180. So this is in centimeters because everything in Maya by default is set to centimeters. And this nicely translates to Unreal Engine 4 or 5. And of course many other game engines as well. So this allows me to judge my proportion and scale to whatever objects I create. And I always have one of these. Sometimes I even have an actual model of a human inserted in here instead of a box. But a box just gives you a quick way to have something if you don't have an actual human model to insert. And then I usually place it on the layer and lock it. And then one more thing I have inside the scene is a dome light. Now this is a Redshift dome light. Redshift is a renderer. And what I like to do with this is assign an HDR image. And I use this to periodically do a quick render of whatever I'm modeling to see how it would look with lighting. Now this is not necessary, but I often like to check my progress with some kind of a render, even if it's going to go into a game engine. This way I can model something and do a quick render test, see what it looks like, see if I have it modeled correctly, see how the light hits it. And it just kind of gives me a bit of inspiration and motivation that it's going to look good in the end. And if you don't have Redshift renderer, you can use Arnold or whatever renderer you're using and do quick tests as you model. So I'll be doing this throughout the process, and I always do this to kind of help me out. Alright, so when it comes to the file cabinet we're going to model, you have to start with specific dimensions. Or not really specific dimensions, but something of a size, something in centimeters that you can start with. You could insert a box and just start scaling just based on what you think the size of the file cabinet should be. But it helps a lot if you just have specific dimensions to enter for the cube and start sizing and just going from there. So what you could do, of course, is you do your research and you find the dimensions for the object. And a really nice tip that I like to use is most of objects and props that you create, you could find dimensions on Amazon. And you can use those values to start with. So for example, here's a basic 4-drawer filing cabinet that we're going to model. And it already gives you the overall dimensions. And I can use these inches, convert them to centimeters, and have something to start with. And that's what I'm going to do. And then you just take this, and then you can convert it to centimeters by doing a quick Google search, inches to centimeters, and then just simply enter 52. This gives you a value in centimeters, and that's where you could use. Now, I'm not going to use these values exactly, but it's a nice starting point, and then I can adjust it based on my scene and based on a human scale reference. So let's do just that. I'm going to go ahead and create a cube, and show you how this process goes. So create a cube, and I'm going to go into the input tab, and I already converted these values. So let's start. The height converted to centimeters is 152. Width is going to be 38, and depth is 63. Now this is going to be a little bit too small for what I want. I want a little bit bulkier file cabinet, and you'll find out that many values that are translated from real world into an actual model tends to be small and doesn't have that volume that you're gonna expect from a game or from a good renderer. Now it will still work just fine, but I usually like to tweak these values. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start adjusting them. So I'm gonna set my width to 45. I'm gonna keep depth the same because I think that looks pretty good. And for height, I'm gonna set it to 140. And actually, I think I converted the height for inches wrong. I think 52 inches in height is actually 132 centimeters. Let me double check. So 52, yeah, 132, not 152. So I'm gonna set my height to 140 to go a little higher. And I usually like to round out these values rather than have decimals, because if I'm going to create a filing cabinet, I may want to stack these on top of each other, and it just makes it easier if they're whole values. So that way I can snap. Alright, let's go ahead and position this on the ground plane. And I think this is good thickness, good volume for this. And now we can begin. So I'm going to have my reference images that I'm going to be looking at throughout this entire process on another monitor. So just know, whenever we model this, I won't bring in the references into the recording, but I will always have them on another monitor that I'm always looking at them. So you should always be looking at what you're modeling and constantly studying your object. So that way you can replicate it in 3D software. So we need to insert extra edges because I don't have enough geometry here in order to focus on the 4 drawers. So I need faces in order to begin to extrude and do something with them, and I just don't have sufficient geometry here. So I need to insert extra edges and begin to subdivide this simple cube into something I can use. So for this, I'm going to use the modeling toolkit. On the right hand side, if you switch over to modeling toolkit, and I'm going to use the connect option. I'm going to switch over to edge component mode. I'm going to select these 4 edges, and I'm going to left click to enable connect. And I want 3 segments. That gives me 4 faces. So if you enable connect, it will insert between the selected edges the amount of segments you want. And if you middle mouse click or drag, you can interactively insert as many as you need. So I just need 3, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter to commit. And now I have sufficient geometry to work with. Now most filing cabinets have a bit of a border at the top and a thicker border on the bottom. Something like this. It has a bit of a kind of a base and a bit more geometry here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce that now. So I'm going to select that top face, and I'm going to extrude, Control E to extrude shortcut, and I'm going to give a bit of thickness. And for this thickness, I'm going to give a thickness of, let's say 4. And then for the bottom, let's select that face. I'm going to extrude that as well. And actually, first let me raise this up. Select that face, and I'm going to extrude this one. And I'm not sure how many units I want, how many centimeters of thickness. So I'll just begin to extrude and look at my reference. And I think 10 is a good number. Let's do 10. I usually round out these values. And not all the time, but I try to. So here's what I have. Let's go ahead and snap this down to our ground plane, to our grid. And since I've been using whole values, it will snap down perfectly. Next, let's go ahead and select these 4 faces. And now we can begin to extrude and create the detail for the drawers. So in the reference right here, we have a bit of indent, and I'm going to try to replicate that in my model. And this is simple to do by simply using the extrude with a few options. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 4 faces, hit Control E to extrude, and I'm going to start to offset. So this is, it begins to offset on the inside to create that extra geo. However, I need to deal with these faces individually, so I'm going to switch keep faces together off. And let's adjust offset. And I think a value of 1 is pretty good. So that gives me that outside border. and the shape for each drawer. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude again, Control E, and let's do another offset. And in this case, I'm going to extrude probably a 0.5. I think 0.5 is good. If you hold down Control and then you use the slider on offset or any of these values, on any of these properties, this will give you fine-tunement, like it gives you an extra decimal point. So left click, hold and drag, it goes whole values. And if you need more precision, just hold down Control and left click and drag. So I think 0.5. I think that should be enough. I just want something that I can extrude in and have that kind of self-shadowing and extra detail pushed in. And I usually like to zoom out and just take a look at my object far away to make sure that everything is looking good and to proportion, especially when I'm beginning to add more geometry into it. So let's go ahead and switch back to face. And now I want to go ahead and select these faces that I created with offset, just these small faces here, and then extrude them in. However, if I have to do this manually, the selection part, that is going to take a little too long that I don't want to select manually. So I'm going to do a quick shortcut key for this. I'm going to have these 4 selected again, and then I'm going to grow my selection. So to grow your selection, there's a shortcut key, but you can find this under Select, Grow, and the shortcut key is Shift period. Shift period and Shift comma will grow and shrink your selection. So let's go ahead and grow by 1. It grabs all those faces, and I'm going to hold Control and deselect all the interior faces. And then I can extrude these faces inside. Control E again, and let's add some thickness. And let's do a thickness of -1. That should be plenty. All right, let's take a look. Now at this point, this is where I like to check, do a quick render using the dome light and an HDR image and see what it looks like. So I already have an HDR image assigned to my dome light. So let me switch over to Redshift. Again, you can use any render. It just helps out so much just to quickly check if you need to adjust any indents, any bevels, any extrusions. So let me do a quick render. And I think that's looking pretty good. If that indent is too much, you can always go ahead and adjust it and change the values. So if it is too much, you can always just jump back, either undo, and sometimes you can even go back into your history stack and change maybe how wide that is. So if I want to go ahead and maybe find the offset, maybe I do 0.25, and then let's do another render. Maybe that gap was too big. And I think that's actually better. Smaller is better in this case. So I'm going to keep that. And then the next thing I want to do is do a bevel around all of the edges on the outside. I think the inside drawers look pretty good. What we're going to end up doing is having the handle, and not this handle, but maybe another one. But these are going to be separate pieces, floating pieces, and we'll just combine them with our main case. But I do want to include a bit of a bevel everywhere on the outside to get that nice little beveled highlight. So for this, I need to go ahead and select all of the edges around. So this may take a little bit of time. I'm just going to hold Shift, double click on all the edges that I can. So it selects a continuous edge loop. In some cases, I just need to select them manually one by one. Select this one, and there's a few more on the bottom. And there's one more here. Make sure you don't miss any edges when you bevel. Otherwise, it's going to be a little harder to fix them because you're going to have a gap of no bevel and quite a few end guns you'll have to deal with. So I think I have everything selected. And now Control B to bevel. The initial fraction, the amount of the bevel is too much. So I'm going to change the fraction here. Let's do 0.25 and increase this amount of segments to 2. That gives you a nicer rounded corners. 1 is just maybe too low. Might be good for some low poly model. But in this case, I'm not really concerned with polygon count. So I'm going to increase the segments to 2. Alright, this is another time that I like to do a quick test render. Just see what that bevel looks like. And see how that light hits it. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little closer and do it again. Again, depending on which AGR image you're using, sometimes you may have to just kind of position your camera a little bit better until that highlight gets hit by the light. All right, that looks looking pretty good to me. Now let me just take a look, make sure that I have all of the edges beveled, and I do. And I'm also going to do the same thing, a slight bevel on the corners for the drawers. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these edges right here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to end up having 16 edges that I will bevel. And the reason I'm counting is because so I don't miss any. And I always check right here in the heads-up display to make sure that I have that proper amount, especially when you're dealing with bevels. And I have just a few more to select here. I have 16, yep. And let's go ahead and zoom in close, and let's do a bevel. Control B, 2 segments, and a smaller fraction. Let's do 0.1. So again, it's going to be very small, but it will be noticeable because now you don't have those 90-degree corners. And let's go ahead and zoom in right here, and let's do a render again. See if I need to adjust anything. Now, I'll probably never get my camera that close, but it does look better than a sharp edge. Let me try the other view real quick. All right, that's looking good. All right, so we've created a simple file cabinet and we added a bit of detail. And now we have 4 drawers that we can deal with. And I think one more thing I want to do is introduce a bit more detail for the top. So if you take a look at the reference, we have a bit of kind of an indent going around like a panel, and this I think might be good, another kind of nice detail to add. So to do that, I already have an edge here, so I'm gonna double click, hold shift, double click to select all around, so all the edges are selected, and there you are. And then I'm going to bevel once. Control B is going to introduce another edge with it, and I'm going to adjust my fraction. Let's do 0.1, and actually let's go 0.05, so it's very small. And then I'm going to switch over to face component mode. Select this face, hold shift, double click on the face next to it, it will select the entire edge ring, and then I can go ahead and extrude. Control E and add a bit of thickness and push that in. I don't want to push in too far because these faces will begin to overlap right about there. Let's do a negative 0.1, and let me do another render and just kind of test. Maybe I just need to increase the fraction. Let's increase the fraction even more. Let's do a negative 0.25. Here we go, much better. And for as far as the main shape goes, I think we're done. Let me just kind of do a render far away. Just kind of take a look at the overall object. And that's my reference. Let me zoom in a little closer on the top. And the next step will be to start adding the handles and the little tag display for each drawer. And here are the ones that I'm going to go with. These right here. So here's the tag and here's the handle. So let's start with the tag, get that out of the way. And we'll only have to create one of each, and then we'll be able to duplicate for the rest of it. So this one looks like it's a cube, and then extruded cube, and then another extrusion on the inside, and then we'll knock out the interior. So let's do that right now. I'm gonna bring in a cube. And let's go ahead and scale this. Move it further. Actually scale it up, and then make it smaller. And let's go in the front view and just raise this up where it needs to go. And then make it smaller even and scale it down. Right about there. And scale it to the sides a little bit. Let's go into perspective, and I'm going to push this in so it gets closer to the drawer. So that way I can judge the scale in depth a lot better. So let's make it smaller, right about there. Let's go in the front view, and now I'm gonna go ahead and select the face, and let's extrude with offset. Control E to extrude, do an offset, I think right about there. Let's take a look in the front, and now let's do another extrusion. And in this case, I'm gonna extrude but add thickness. Control E, and let's add thickness to it. Another 0.5. And now let's do another extrusion with offset. Let's do another, just keep it consistent, 0.5 for this as well. And then let's do another extrusion and push that in. And I'm going to go in the side view and see how far I need to push it in. Actually, instead of using the thickness, I can hit W to go to move tool, and just after I extrude, you can use your regular movement tools and just push the face down however far you need. Actually, maybe I'll go down here past that face. And actually, let me adjust it a little bit so it kind of has similar thickness all over. And then I can delete this face right here. So that way I have a hole. And also I'm going to delete this face in the back. So that way we can see right through it. Because if you take a look at the reference here, we can see right through to the drawers. So that's perfect. And then let me take a look. I'm thinking I either want to maybe extrude this further and then just kind of close up this gap. I'll extrude with offset, and maybe I can just push it all the way in like so. But I don't think that's going to look too good. So I'm going to actually push the edges right here, and then I'm going to extrude those edges, Control E, and add offset. Actually, let's do thickness. Let me see, which one do I need? Because I want them to kind of spread out. Here we go. I need to add a bit of thickness. Let's go in the front and do that here. Right about there. So that creates the interior face that you can't really see yet. And then Control E again and add thickness. And that gives me thickness that I can push in, right like so. So you can see on the inside, it just gives me extra geometry. That looks a little bit more real. And actually these faces right here on the inside, I don't need anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and delete them. Just make sure I am only deleting the faces that I do not need. I was just checking if I had a double face there. And let me go ahead and let me go on a wireframe. Let's go back to shaded. So I need to delete the face that I will not see, which is right there. Actually, let me go to object mode, hit Control 1 to isolate select. So I'm only working with the object itself. And there's one more face I will never see, which is this one right here. Bring everything back, Control 1. And here's the nice looking tag. Now I will do a pass of bevels. But before I do that, I just want to kind of take a look if I got the size right. And it looks correct. So let's do a bevel pass. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this just in case I need to bring it back. If I mess up, if I do too many bevels, if it just doesn't look right. I usually like to duplicate things off when I do a bevel pass on the corners. And now let's select all of these right here. I can bevel these with it 2 segments and 0.1 or 0.25. So that gives me nice corners. And let's do one across here as well, Control B, 2 and 0.25, keep it the same. And I can even do these corners right here all across. So if I just select them individually, all at once though. So I like to do just the outside corners and then the corners themselves. So when you do bevels and passes, it works out a lot better. But you just have to make sure that you select continuous ones if you're doing the cross like I did. They all have to be selected all around to avoid any issues. And let's do a bevel here, Control B. The fraction is going to be way too much. Let's do 0.2, 0.1. Let's do 2 segments. And smaller fraction, 0.05. And that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to bring in this one just for comparison. So this is the low poly version. And this is the beveled version. Of course, we are going higher in triangle count. 272 for this one, only 48 for this one. So again, because I know my output is going to be just a render in Redshift and possibly just a beauty scene in UV4, I'm not concerned with triangle count at all. So knowing your output will help you determine where to add geometry or where to keep it low poly. So let's do a quick render and take a look at the result. Zoom in a little bit and do another one. Yeah, it looks much nicer on the right. And if you still need to adjust, maybe the thickness is too much, in this case, I could probably scale everything on the side like so. Just take these and scale them. However, just be careful when you scale things when you already have bevels. The bevels will scale with them, and you may not want to do that. And if you don't want to destroy the bevels, you will just have to do this manually. Just select and just move these in. And take these and just move them. So this will not destroy the bevels, but scale will. And let me do one more render. And that's much better. Just less depth, and looks like it does in the reference. Alright, so that's our tag. And now the next step is we're going to do the handle. The handle has two components to it. It has a square base, and then it has a rounded handle itself. So what we could do is just do a cube, do the same thing that we did for this, just a bunch of extrusions with offset, beveled, and then do the handle that's rounded separate. Or we can do all together as one solid piece. So I'm going to attempt this as one solid piece. And in order to make some of these pieces rounded, so we can bridge and have this rounded while keeping this square, is going to be circleize. So let's introduce another cube to start with. And let me go ahead and drag this all the way up where it needs to go. And make it larger. And just kind of set the size of it first. I think right about that, I think that's pretty good. Let's take a look at it in perspective view, compare it to everything else. And let's scale it down. Right about so. And let's position it up against this geometry. So that's going to be the first part, and it's actually brought in a little bit closer, maybe a little bit smaller. And let me duplicate it just to see what it would look like, the two pieces, just to block things out. Alright, I think that's pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and select this one. Control 1 to isolate, select. I'm going to delete the face in the back, bring everything back, Control 1. Let's push this out right about there. And let's do an extrusion on this face. Control E. Let's add offset. Let's go in the front view and just adjust it here. It's a little easier to see right about there. Maybe less. And I'm constantly looking at my reference, see how far I need to push things. And now let's do an extrude and push that out. Control E. Right about there. And let me go in the side view, hit F to frame, and compare it. Okay, everything's looking good here. Right about there. That's good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this off so I have a copy just in case. So again, I'm not sure if the circleize option will work or not. It will probably work, but I want to have bevels everywhere after. And it might be a little harder to do once I have circleize in here and I have to bevel. It might give me more work to do rather than maybe keeping that rounded handle as a separate piece of geometry. And again, rounded piece of geometry might be faster because it's such a small area. I may not have to fuse it together. And again, my render camera is going to be further away, so I don't need to be so close up on it to see that detail. So, but I do want to attempt it and see if I can make it happen. But if not, I'll come back to that other one. So in order to do circleize, I need more geometry in here first. So I'm going to select this face again, I'm going to extrude with offset. So that gives me the area that I will be able to circleize, this quad right here. Now I'm going to delete this face. Let me isolate this, Control 1. So here's what I have. I completely knocked that out. Now I cannot circleize these. I can circleize edges, I can circleize vertices. So I'm going to circleize vertices. Now I can't do anything to it right now. So if I go to Edit Mesh, Circleize, nothing will happen because I don't have sufficient geometry to circleize. So I'm going to use the Connect, the multi-cut tool, and insert additional cuts. So I'm going to hold down Control, middle mouse click on all the four corners right here. Control, middle mouse click will insert right in the center. So that gives me extra vertices that I can select. And I can now circleize these, no problem. So edit mesh and circleize. Alright, so I have one piece. Let me see what happens when I duplicate it and then try to bridge between those edges and see if I can get that shape that I see in the reference. So I'm going to duplicate this one, so I have a copy of it. And in order to use the bridge tool, you need to have the object combined as one. So I'm going to select both of these meshes, go to mesh and combine. Go to perspective. I'm going to double click to select these edges, double click to select these edges, and go to edit mesh and bridge. I need to change my curve type to blend and increase divisions. So that gives me the shape that I'm looking for. Let's bring everything back, Control 1, and kind of zoom out. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I may need to adjust this from top view because I don't want it to be so rounded. Maybe I want a little bit more angular right here. So maybe I need to adjust it manually by actually pushing these verts in a little bit at a time, making sure I'm selecting all of them across right there, and maybe hold Control to deselect, and keep kind of adjusting until I get the shape that I want. Alright, so far that's working out pretty good. Now let me go ahead and insert a bunch of edges on here. Or bevels, not edges. I don't want to insert edges. I want to bevel to make this nice and rounded. So let me take a look, because I want to have rounded corners right here. So let me see if I can just, first I'm going to double click on these edges right here and on the other side as well, and bevel these first, Control B with 2 segments, and let's do 0.2 of a fraction. You can also do this on these as well. Control B. Let me reselect them again. Let me move this up just to make sure I didn't duplicate something. So double click on that edge, double click on this, hold Shift and Control B, and let's do 2 segments here, and let's do 0.1. Alright, so that's working out good. And now I want to go ahead and see if I can round out these corners right here as well as these. So if I double click, it's going to select everything around. So I only want to select these across here. So let me do a quick test first. So I'm going to Shift, I'm going to select this edge, hold Shift, and let's do double click on this edge right here. It'll select everything in between. Let me do a quick test by beveling just this one corner. Control B with 2 segments and 0.1. Alright, so that gives me a nice corner right here. Now we just need to fix this area in order to remove the n-gons. Now the only problem that I'm seeing currently with this shape is my cylindrical shape is very low poly. So if I double click on this, I only have 8 edges to create my cylinder. So when I render this, it's not going to look as good as if I had it maybe 16 or 24. So let me do a quick render. So this is the one downside. I may just go with, let me see, because these edges are also set to a hard edge. Let me undo until I get that out, back. So these edges are also set to a hard edge. So you may see this faceted look to them, but should be okay if I turn them to a soft edge. So I'm gonna select this model, hold Shift, right click, hold, go to Soften Harden Edge, and toggle Soft Edge Display. And all these edges right here for the curvature, I'm gonna select them and I'm gonna set them to a soft edge. And I'm gonna go to Mesh Display and Soften Edge. And let's do a render just on this. And I think this will work. Again, I'm so up close, but I'm not going to be rendering this at this up close perspective. You know, my scene that I'm thinking of is going to be, the file cabinet is going to be in the back, like so. It's going to take up the entire scene, but it's going to be further away with other objects. So the screen space for the handle, you know, it's like sometimes you don't have to worry about so many things because you know what your shot will be. So I think this is going to work out well. So So let me go ahead and round out those corners and fix the end guns. So I'm going to do this really quick. I'll probably speed up this portion. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select this edge right here, hold shift, double click on this edge to select everything in between, and I'm going to bevel it. But I'm going to do this all at the same time. So that way it's one single bevel and all the values are the same. And then I'm going to have to come in and fix the end guns on the corners. Alright, here we are. I have everything selected. And now let's do our bevel all at the same time. Control B. Let's do 2 segments with a lower fraction, 0.25 maybe. Let's maybe do 0.2. Zoom out a little bit. Now we have rounded corners. And now it's time to fix this. So I'm going to enable multi-cut. And I'm going to fix this on 1 so you can see what it does. But then I'll speed up for the rest of it, because it's just repeating the same thing for all the other corners. So here's the end gun, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So an end gun is a quad that has more than 4 edges. And this quad right here, this face, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this. So I can use multi-cut, or maybe let's do a target weld instead. Let's switch over to vertex, enable target weld, and actually just target weld this one to that corner. So that gives me a quad and a triangle, so that's good. Yeah, actually that's going to be a lot faster. Target weld will take care of the problem. Actually, I'll do this in real time because that's a lot quicker than I thought. And let's drag this one. There's one more at the top and one more on the bottom. So drag this one, target weld, and one more target weld. Go to object mode. And now we have our nice looking handle. I'm going to press Alt 5 or click on this icon right here to disable wireframe unshaded so we can see how it is smoothed out. And we have a nice looking handle, tag, and file cabinet. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily duplicate this piece for the rest of the drawers going down. And the reason I'm doing this temporarily is because this is a repeating element, so you want to go ahead and UV this first and then duplicate it. So that way you don't have to UV the same object over and over and over again. But I do want to see how it looks all together. So I'm going to go ahead and Control D to duplicate, move that down, Shift D, Shift D. Shift D will duplicate with transform. And let me zoom in and actually move these out. And I'm going to do a quick test render to check my modeling. Render view, let's render. And that is looking pretty good. Let's get a little close up. Yep, that's looking nice. So I think this is now done. I'm going to do one final test just to see if I have any end guns. Even though nobody's going to really see my topology or check, this is just for a tutorial. I have to keep my scene clean just to kind of maintain quality across all of my pieces that I create. So I'm going to select everything and let's check for end guns. I'm going to go to Mesh, Clean Up Options, and I'm going to make sure that I have Select the Matching Polygons. So that way Maya selects it for me instead of fixing it. And then I'm going to also enable faces with more than 4 sides. And hit Apply. If everything gets deselected, that means you have no end guns. And let me go ahead and delete these pieces right here, because I'm going to UV them and then we'll duplicate them across. Let's UV this file cabinet. Now overall, this file cabinet is not a very complex object. If I take a look at the reference, it contains just one solid material for pretty much everything else, and with the exception of course of the file, the name tag, and the handle. Those are separate materials, but they're separate objects. But the entire thing is one solid painted metal. So usually you would make cuts, UV seams, UV texture seams, and separate UV shells to where you would want maybe to have a different material, and kind of pay a little bit more attention to where the transition between different materials would happen, and that's where you make your cuts. In that case, this overall is going to be fairly simple. I just have to be concerned with the drawers themselves, and because we've introduced quite a few bevels, I just have to make sure I have my selections correct, and I have no overlapping UVs when I do this. in order to separate the interior parts of this file cabinet. So there are separate UV shells. So first I'm going to begin with the tag and handle. Get them out of the way, and then we'll attack the file cabinet. So I don't like to use the checker map that comes with Maya, and I usually have a separate material with a UV texture that I use instead. For UVs, you can use the floating window UV editor, like so, or you can use the workspace and switching it to UV editing. And I'm going to use this instead. So it makes it a little bit cleaner than having the floating window around. Eventually, we're going to combine the main file cabinet, the name tag holder, and the handle into one single texture. So everything's going to be combined in the end as one object. But for right now, we're going to treat them as separate. And then we'll deal with combination and dealing with UV texture density towards the end. So let's start with this first. I'm going to go ahead and create my separate material so I can take a look at my UV grid and how my UV stretching is going to happen. And just, when I look at it, it'll be easier for me to work with. However, you could use under textures and enable checker map. It'll give you this checker map pattern. I don't like to use this. So I'm going to go to Hypershade and create a Lambert material. So let's go to Maya, Lambert, and I'm going to rename this to UV grid and assign my UV grid texture into the color parameter. Now let me show you what my UV grid texture looks like. Here it is. That's the one I use. And I have another one that I use also. This is one of them. And that's the one I'm going to use. I already have it placed inside my project directory into the source images folder. So all I need to do is click on the checker box, file, image name, click on the folder, and just simply go and choose my UV grid. And open. Let's close it. And I'm going to select all of the objects that I want to apply the material onto. Right click, hold, go to assign existing material, and choose UV grid. If you don't see it, make sure you have 6 enabled on your keyboard, or this icon right here, textured. So you can see there's some heavy stretching on the main piece, and of course there's some stretching on everything else, because we haven't UV'd it. But I like to use this a lot better than that checker pattern. Also, just temporarily, I'm going to quickly increase the repetition of this UV grid. So I'm going to hit Control A to go to Attribute Editor, go to UV grid, go to Color, and then go to UV coordinates. And then click on this icon right here. It'll take me to a way to repeat my UV. So I'll go to 2 by 2. So it just repeats my UV texture. So that way I can tell a lot better what needs to be worked on and what's being stretched. All right, let me go ahead and hit Control A, go back to UV toolkit actually. And now we can begin. I'm going to select the name tag holder piece, and I'm going to hit Control 1 to isolate select. So for this piece, I'm going to have to separate this piece into a couple of different shells. There's also a face back here that we kind of dealt with because it's not attached to the main area. This is going to be a separate UV shell. So that face we created just so we cannot see on the inside of the geometry if it happens to be at an angle. So first, let me go ahead and project everything and get all the UVs inside 0 to 1 space and make them look a little bit better. And what I like to do is just choose a projection method, X, Y, or Z, and just do a straight projection on everything. So let's go to Create, Planar, Options, and I'm going to choose Z axis. So it's straight on. All right, and then let's take a look of where we need to begin to make cuts to separate these into separate UV shells. And then we'll deal with them. We might run unfold, few unfold options. So in the side UV toolkit, you have unfold options. We'll be using some of these, as well as there's an unfold option under modify, unfold, and we'll be using this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click this edge right here. I'm going to hit 5 to go with shaded mode. I'm going to double click on this, and I will make a cut. So inside the UV editor, I'm going to hold down Shift, right click, hold, make a cut. And also inside the UV editor, I don't have that texture showing up. Is because I have under image, display disabled. Otherwise this texture would show up when you apply it as a material. So you can disable it by hitting, you go to texture and you hit display 6. And then I have shaded enabled, and that is under view, and you have wireframe and you have shaded, and the hotkeys are 4 and 5. So I like to view in shaded mode, hitting 5. So that gives me ability to see what faces are flipped, which are going to show in red, and anything in blue is going to show up as correctly flipped in the proper orientation. So, but I often switch between 4 and 5 depending if I'm working in perspective or not, because sometimes it's hard to see with shaded like so. So I'm utilizing quite a lot of hotkeys. So I already made that cut, and now that is a separate UV shell. So I'm going to select UVs, double click on the UVs, and I can now move that UV shell out of the way because I made the cut all the way across around all the edges. All right, and then let's take a look how else we can kind of separate this a little further. Because if I just unfold this piece right now, it may not give me exactly what I want, but let's try it. I'm going to select all the UVs, and let me try the unfold option inside the UV toolkit, and let me try unfold. All right, so not too well, it's overlapping, it's not bad actually. So if I run maybe unfold along U and unfold along V, still there's some overlap, but this is not bad. Let's take a look at the texture. There's some stretching going on right here. So if I make a cut somewhere, it'll fix some of that stretching. But again, this piece is going to be occupying a very small amount of UV space. So I'm not too concerned with stretching on this. But let's make it a little bit better. Let me undo. And let's select this edge right here. I'm going to make a cut. Make a cut here. Make a cut right there. And make a cut right along that edge. And let me run my unfold options again. So let me try unfold. Let me undo. Let me try just unfold along U and unfold along V. All right, so that split that up. Looks a little bit better. And let me take a look at these. Maybe I can move these out manually. And let me hit F to frame my view. And there's some stretching going on right there. Yeah, some significant stretching across here. So let me undo all the way back. And let's cut along here as well. So the more cuts you can make, the better unfold will work. However, you are introducing texture seams when you are making those cuts. But again, this is a smaller texture resolution piece. It's a small, we're not going to be up close to it. So I'm not concerned the amount of cuts I'm making. So let me, let's just do one cut across there. And I'll do another cut here. And do the same thing on this side. Cut. And I'm hitting G to repeat my last use command, which was cut UVs. And let's go and unfold. And let's do unfold along U and V. All right, so that's not bad. That actually should be pretty good. There's some stretching right there, of course, because we have overlapping UVs, but this is a lot better. You can see it's a lot cleaner. There's slight distortion, but when we apply a texture, probably not even going to notice it. So let's do this right here manually. Now I'm going to keep this, and I'm just going to select some of these UVs and just unfold them manually. Otherwise, these are not really going to unfold. Maybe I can use the optimize tool. That did not work. Maybe unfold tool. Still, I want to keep those a little bit more straight. So let me go back and just move them manually. So let's select these two UVs, and I'm going to drag them back. And let me zoom in so you can see what's happening here. So I'm just going to drag these back right about there maybe. And then I'm going to select these UVs right here. And that one. And let's drag that one out. So that way no longer overlapping. There's slight distortion here, which we will never see. And I'm going to repeat this for all the other parts. Let me select this, drag this one back, select these two UVs and drag that one. And I just select this one and move it up. Let me zoom in. All right, so that looks better, much better. And just repeat this across everything and unfold those UVs ourselves. All right, that's looking good. All right, this piece is done. Let me take a look at it from far away. UVs, and it seems like I might need to kind of, I think these right here on the sides are stretched out. So I'm gonna go ahead and take them manually and just move them up right about there. And just look at the lettering, see if there's any stretching. So if I went too far, you can see that they're being squished. So I just need to kind of push them up until I see more of a consistent. All right, so that's looking good. All right, and that piece is done. Let me move it out of the way. Again, we'll deal with the textile density of the shell later. I can probably scale it down because I know it's going to be a lot smaller. And let's deal with this big piece right here. Double click on it. There's another shell in here, and that's for the faces on the inside. And there's only 4 of them, and I can probably just separate them and project them on Y and X. Let's deal with that last. So for this piece right here, there's some stretching going to be happening at the very top, and everything else is looking good. So I'm going to select the edges, and I'm going to select this edge right here. Let's make a cut. One on the bottom in the corner, and there's 2 more on the other side. This one and that one right there. Let's select the UVs. Let me try to run the other option. So this works pretty well. Let's go to modify, unfold options. Let's see what we can do with this. I'm gonna reset the settings. Unfold 3D. Let's hit apply. That did not work. Let me try legacy. Under legacy, I'm going to unfold constraint, vertical, hit apply, and let's do horizontal and hit apply. All right, and that does a pretty good job. So I believe that option is very similar to unfold along U and V. It might be a similar, maybe same or very similar algorithm, or it might be exactly the same. I'm not sure, but it seems like it does a pretty good job and very close to what I would be. Let's do, maybe I run that again, and you can see it's pretty much identical. And it maintained pretty good consistency, didn't stretch anything else out. So I'll keep that. So that piece is done. And we'll deal with the placement layout as well. Let me go ahead and select the faces right here. These faces alone, I can probably do them one at a time and just project. So I'll select this face right here and that face on the other side. And I'm going to project these, planar project on X. And then I'm going to select these 2 faces, and these are going to be projected on Y because they're top and bottom. And then I'm going to select UV shell. And anything that's in red needs to be flipped. So I'm going to go to modify and flip. So it needs to be blue. And there are 2 faces here, and that red one right here, I need to flip it as well. Modify and flip. And let's go to UVs. I'm going to select them all. I'm going to scale them down. And these will get positioned somewhere in here. And we'll have to work with the textile density of these as well so they all match. So I'll just place them somewhere on here next to each other so I know what they are. Actually, let's place them inside the working area. So this is your important part right here. 0 to 1 UV space. This is where all UVs are going to go. These 3 squares are going to be your working area. This is where you place things temporarily as you UV and unwrap them. Alright, so here is our piece. Unwrapped, so that is done. Let me go ahead and delete history. I already have it on my tool shelf. Let's save, and Control-1 to bring everything back. Alright, and the next one is going to be this handle. Press Control-1 to isolate select. Let's go back to our UV editing workspace. And let's deal with this. So, similar approach. We need to find where we're going to make our cuts, which is going to be, I'm going to separate this handle along the seam somewhere in here. This right here will be one UV shell, probably make some cuts, maybe even probably maybe 2. Very similar because we have this part right here and then it might cause some stretching. But again, a small area of resolution. Never going to be up close, so I can be a little bit forgiven in the amount of stretching that this has. Let's go ahead and do a straight projection, and in this case I'm going to project on Y, just to get all the UVs kind of re-UV'd and redone. So I'm going to go to create on the entire object, planar, options, and let's do Y projection. And let's make a cut across the handle. Let's get the handle out of the way. And make this smaller. Going to double click on this edge right here and make a cut there, and do the same thing on the other side. Double click on this edge right here, hit G to repeat last, use command, grab all the UVs. Now this is a separate UV shell, and let's make a cut across here. So for pieces like this, the easiest way to deal with them is you project them on a specific axis, then you find where you want to make a cut so it can unfold and unwrap properly. So I'm going to make a cut right there so the texture seam is on the inside. Let's make a cut, Then I'm going to select all the UVs. So you can see that there's a texture seam right there, border edge. If you don't see those border edges, you can always enable under View, Texture Borders, 9. Super helpful to see where you are making your cuts. And then let's unfold. I'm going to go to Modify, Unfold Options. Let's go to Unfold 3D and hit Apply. And this piece is done. If you want to make it a little bit more straighter, you can manually straighten this out. Or maybe under Unfold, Straighten Shell. That did not work. Let's try Straighten UVs. Nope, that's not what I want. I'm going to go ahead and select one of the edges and go to Modify and Orient Shells to Edges. So that's straightened it out a little bit more. So anytime you need to straighten your entire shell based on an edge, that's a great way to do so. Orient Shell to Edges. Or you can run under Unfold some of these options here. Let's move this down. So that is complete. Let's deal with these two things on the side where the handle is attached. So first, I kind of want to minimize the amount of cuts that I make and unfold. Let me try one thing and see if that works. I'm going to make a cut across here. So I'm going to select this edge. Let me temporarily disable my texture. I'm going to hit 5. So I'm going to make a cut right there and make maybe another cut right there. And I'm going to repeat this on all 4 corners. So I'm going to select this one and that one, make a cut, and one more. And I'm going to attempt to just unfold as I have it as is. It may not work based on this part right here. I may have to cut across here. Usually this is a good place to cut because it's a 90-degree angle. But let me attempt it and let me see what it does. Before I do though, let me project these on Z. And I should have done this before. Let me try and run unfold. It may not work now. Unfold, apply. Yeah, let's not do that. Let me project these faces first because it looks like I made a cut across here when I selected the interior. So I'm going to go ahead, since we projected it on Y, I actually need to reproject it straight on. So I'm going to select both of these faces, or both of these kind of shells, and let's go to Create, Planar, and let's go on Z Project. Here we go, that's what I want. So I'm not touching this shell. This shell is done, the one on the bottom. And let me go ahead and reselect those edges and run my command, my unfold, and make sure select these. And if this works on this one, I'll just repeat the same thing for the other one. Although I could just delete the other one, and no, I probably wouldn't because it's attached. So I'll just have to do the same thing to the other side. I select all the UVs. Let me go to Modify, Unfold Options, and just run Unfold. And actually, that is pretty good. That's what I was hoping the tag holder would do. In my case, the Unfold option, for some reason, it didn't do what I kind of expected it to do, and it's doing it for this one. And that's what I was going for, just one shell, and just do a straight unfold with some slight stretching. And let me hit 6. So there's some, you can see slight stretching right there, but I'm not going to be worrying about that. And I think that's done. We're done with that piece. So that is complete. Let me move it down, and I'm going to repeat the same thing on this side. So let me grab the edges, make a cut. These two. In UV editor, hold shift, right click hold, go to cut. And now I'm going to press G to repeat last use command. Select this edge, hit G, this edge. Actually, let's select this edge and then hold shift, this edge, and G. And then run unfold. Modify, unfold. Done. So this is going to be 3 shells. Let's save. Control 1 to bring everything back. Let's go back quickly to Maya Classic. And now I can select this right here and this right here. Let me delete history on both. They both have been UV'd. Let me bring back the UV editor first and just kind of position them next to each other so I know what those shells are. So in order for you to select, right now they're separate objects. In order for you to select all the UVs at the same time, just select all the objects that you want to kind of move the UVs for. In my case, I already have the tag selected and the handle. So now you can see I have both of those UV shells together. showing up in the UV editor. And I'm just going to move these next to each other. And I'm going to temporarily resize them, but they're still not same UV textile density yet. But this way at least I have them together. Alright, so those are done. And I'll duplicate them across once I'm done with this. And I have the textile density correct for all the pieces. And that way I can duplicate all the way down. And I don't have to deal with separate shells for everything. So that's probably going to be at the very end. So let's deal with this main file cabinet and UV it. So let's see how we're going to attack this file cabinet. I'm going to hit 5 to go smooth shaded mode. And there's only so many sides that we can kind of deal with. Right? You can think of this as a cube. Just a little bit more detailed cube with bevels. So I'm going to deal with drawers separately. So they are going to be separate UV shells. We're going to have probably the front as a separate UV shell, as well maybe the side. Maybe we'll attach the front and the side together as one flowing shell. Top and bottom, of course, probably separate. So let's go ahead and begin. Let me go to UV editing mode, workspace. So I'm going to utilize a lot of selections, especially select, grow, and shrink, especially for these drawers. So inside we have a little bit of extra detail. So we need to grab quite a few of these faces because I want to keep them together along with the drawer. And then we'll probably introduce a small cut in order so we can unfold. So I'm going to select this face, and for this I'm going to, in the UV editor, I'm going to hit 4 to go to wireframe. Just makes it easy to select. I don't see those blue or red faces. Select this face, I'm going to hold shift, select this one, and this one. So I have 4 selected. And I'm going to project them. Actually, I'm not going to project them yet. I'm just going to make them my selections. So I'm going to grow my selection in order to grab all these faces, and then I'm going to project them. So let's go to select, grow. I'm going to start utilizing the shortcut key, which is shift period and shift comma for grow and shrink. Let's do it one more time. So shift period and one more time. And just double check that I grabbed everything. It looks like it did. And let's project these faces on Z. And select C, project. Alright, so here are the faces. And let's go ahead and enable 6 for textured mode. And there's some stretching, of course, on the sides, so let's deal with that. I'm going to select all these edges right here, and then I'm going to unfold. So for this, it's just a matter of making sure that I select them on all sides and make a cut. And I just need to do this for every drawer. Might be a little bit tedious, but I mean, that's just part of UVing. UVing is not fun. Sometimes it's a little time consuming depending on the complexity of your mesh, but it is a very important, necessary part of the production. So you just have to spend the time, put in the time, and make yourself work a little faster. And after a while, actually, you kind of begin to enjoy UVing, just because you get in the flow of just selecting the edges, making cuts, especially once you have some experience and you know what to do, which functions to run, what the result that you're gonna get, usually the predictable result you're gonna achieve. And again, this just comes from experience, UVing a lot of different objects. So I'm gonna hit 5, let's go to shaded mode. I'm gonna select all the UVs here in the UV editor, and I'm gonna run unfold on all of them, see what happens. So I'm gonna modify, unfold. In this case, it's gonna be the unfold 3D option. And here we go, that looks pretty good. Let me kind of zoom in a little closer. Here we go, that's unfolded pretty nicely. I'm gonna go to edge, select the edge for each shell, just one straight edge. Then go to modify and orient shells to edges. So now they're gonna come in straight. And I'm gonna do this for everyone. And I'm pressing G now to repeat my last use command. Alright, so these 4 are now straight, and the drawers are done. If I take a look at the texture mode, hit 6, I have a nice even grid. And if there is any stretching on the inside, I don't care. It's going to be so small and unnoticeable. And for these drawers, there's no stretching. It's just a texture seam on the inside that nobody's going to notice. Alright, so for these, I'm going to start collecting the the pieces for this file cabinet on the bottom, because everything else we have in one of these other right here for the drawer, I mean for the handle and for the name tag. So I'm going to utilize this space right here. All right, let's deal with the top. I think the top should be pretty quick to do. I'm going to take the top itself, and I'm probably going to keep all these faces together as one UV shell, and all these faces on the all around, including the ones on the bottom. Or I could maybe run and keep all these shells on the sides together. So I mean, there's a couple of different options you can run through. In this case, because I have a little bit of a divot detail here, I think what I'll do, I'll just select this face and I'll just grow my selection. Shift period, just grab all these faces. And let's do a couple more times. Grow my selection. One more time and one more. And actually, let me shrink my selection one time. Oh no, let's grow. This face right here, that's not selected. It looks like it's selected, but if I go to 5 shading mode, actually inside the UV editor, let me turn it off. This is what's messing me up, because I'm thinking this is selected, but it's not. So I'm gonna hit full wireframe in the UV editor. So I don't want that face selected. I'm gonna probably keep that shell, that face all around, probably with one of these shells. All right, so I have everything selected. Let's project on Y. Go to create, planar, options, Y, let's project. All right, so I have some overlapping shells, of course, at the very top. Top is very nice, but on the sides and underneath. So I just need to select edges where I want to make my cut. So I'm going to select my cut to cut the edges, starting right here, this and this. So I'm going to keep the front of the file cabinet as clean as possible, and I'm going to introduce a texture seam right here in the corner. So let's select this edge right here, and I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to make a cut right there. And let's do this on the other side as well. And I think for this, let's go over here in the corner, because this is the back and I'm not worried. So I'm going to try to hide some texture seams, even though they may not be that noticeable. I still want to minimize them from the view and hide them somewhere in the back. So I'll select these right here. Let's make a cut there. And I think I need to have one more. Nope, that's it. Let's do the other side. Select this one. And I'm just double checking. Okay, I cut right there. So I'll keep it consistent. Cut. And let's select this edge and cut. And for this side, I'm also going to keep it on the side right here. Let's make a cut right there. This, make a cut. All right. So let me go ahead and select all the UVs. Let me hit 5 or 6 to see my textures. And I'm going to unfold, modify, unfold. Select one of my edges, go to modify and orient shells to edges. So now it's straight, or somewhat straight. So let me take a look. Yep, everything's looking good. Let's select the UVs. Let me check double over here. That's cut, okay. Yep, I like it. Let's rotate a little bit. And I'm just checking all my seams. That's exactly where I want them. So it's all even. All right, good. So that is done. Make this shell smaller. Position it over here. And we are done with that. So let's, we can also do the same thing on the bottom. But for the bottom, I'm gonna keep this shell right here as one shell. So let's hit 5 here. Here I want to go to wireframe in the UV editor. So for this one, I'm just gonna grab the bottom face, and let's grab one more, grow our selection of faces, and that's all I'm gonna do for the bottom. So there's gonna be a texture seam right here in the corner as it switches to the bottom, and let's project that face on Y. Select this face, and I don't need to do anything for this. And the only thing I do need to do is to flip, because it's inverted. So I'm going to select all the UVs, go to modify and flip these faces, this shell. So that's going to be on the bottom. So I'll just position some of these shells where they need to go so I know where they are in terms of the layout. Because I will probably lay these out inside the UV 0 to 1 space manually. So I just need to know what they are so I have some sort of order for everything that I see in my UVs, in my UV layout. Let's deal with the sides now. So after each and every shell you kind of get out of the way, it makes it easier and easier because you kind of, you begin to narrow down what you need to do next and how much you have left. So for the sides, I'm going to select this manually. So I'm going to select this face right here, this face. I'm going to hold down Tab and left click, hold and drag to paint a selection. I'm also going to go to the shaded mode and wireframe in the UV editor so that I can see my selections better. Let's select this face. Now here I'm going to hold down Shift and left click and Shift and left click on this face. And I'm just going to keep these faces on the side because I want to have my texture seam right there, kind of following this, the one that I already created at the top. And I should probably grab these as well. So this one, and these I'm going to select manually because they're so small. So Shift, left click, grab this one. Let's come down so I grab the ones on the bottom. And I have one across here. And let me just double check the one small face right across here. So that's going to go in the front. All right, so let's go ahead and project this. This is going to be projected on X. Create, planar, and project on X. So I'm going to hit 6 for texture view. Let me move these. Yep, so this way I can kind of check. When I start moving my UV shell, I also check that I selected all the faces and projected them. And I can already see that the letters are flipped, so I just need to flip this UV shell. Modify and flip. And let's do the same thing on the other side. Let me scale this down first and just position it where it would go. It's going to be right there. And let me go back to shaded mode and do the same thing on this side. I do have to deal with one face right here, so right now it's overlapping, but let's deal with it in just a bit. So I'm going to select this, paint the selection all the way down, hold Tab, and select a bunch of small little faces right here, hold Shift and left click. This one, there's one more right there, and a couple on the bottom. That one and that one. Let me check on the other side. With these, you always want to double check, because if you miss one face, then you may have to reproject, because then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to kind of match it up. You add a little bit more time. So making sure you have everything selected that you need before you project is better than trying to, fix it afterwards. So spend the time to double check. And I think that's good. Yep, that's it. So let's go ahead and project this also on X. And move this down. Let's hit 6 to see my texture. Let's scale it down, position it right there. And there's an overlapping face at the very top. This one right here, that's actually 2. So let me see how I can deal with this. I just want to raise it up. I don't need to unfold because it's just 2 faces. So I should be able to maybe just select them manually, select this face and just move them up. And I actually need to convert them to UVs. So I'll actually go and enable 6, actually go 5, so it's a UV shaded mode. And maybe let me select these UVs and maybe drag them up a little bit. And let's take actually this one and drag it down, and take this one and drag it up. Let me try unfolding. Maybe unfold will work instead of doing this manually. So I'm going to select all the UVs by double clicking on them and run unfold. Yep, that worked. Let's do the same thing here. Unfold, and I'm just going to select one of. It does destroy kind of it no longer makes it straight. So that's the only thing that I kind of don't like that unfold does. because it has to compensate for this little corner. So let me undo. I want to keep these shells straight. And I think it did the same thing for the top. Like you can see there's a little bit of a distortion here. So maybe I'll try to straighten the shell out as well. See what I can do. One of the automatic ways. So instead of doing this the unfold way, let me see. Maybe I can run this. Let me select all the UVs, and I just want to see maybe I can attempt to unfold along U. No, let's maybe select all these faces right UVs and just unfold only the selected ones. Here we go. Unfolding along V, only the selected selected UVs did what I wanted to do. So I selected them all, unfold along V, and just unfolded them. So perfect. That's what I want. So I'll do the same thing here. Just select those at the top, unfold, and raise them up. Let me see if I can quickly fix this one right here. I really don't like how skewed that is, even though it doesn't seem like it's gonna really cause any issues. But let's see if I can just fix it quickly. So I'm gonna select all these UVs. Let me unfold and unfold along V. That looks like it's straightened them out a lot better than before. Here's before, a little skewed. Here's after, just straighten those out. Maybe let's try unfold along U. So that's what creates a little bit of a distortion. So I'll undo that. So I'll keep this. It's a slightly better result, even though it might be not that noticeable. So then, only thing I have left is the one in the back and one in the front. So let's get rid of the one in the back. And then the only one I have to deal with is the front shell. So for this, and it looks like I did not, I should have probably grabbed these faces right here too and kept them together on the side. And it looks like I missed them. I should have continued with this edge right here and ran them down. So again, it's just one of those things, you know, you have to, whether you can let it go depending on the time, or you might want to fix it. In my case, let's fix it. You know, I want to keep this kind of more consistent, more neat, keep it that quality. So I want to run that texture seam along together, and I really don't want that kind of transition. Just even though it's a small face, it's going to be in the back. Let's just keep it quality. So how would we do this a little bit quicker? I'm going to select the faces of all these shells on the side, and I'm just going to add to it the ones that I should have added before. Let me go to shader mode, and I'm just going to select these and this one right here. And let's project, and this is going to be projection on X. Planar, project on X. So I reprojected this. Let me flip this, modify flip. And let me do my UVs again. Select just the top ones, unfold along V. Actually, those are unfold along V, right? Not U. So it unfolds at the top. The ones on the sides look like they're already unfolded pretty nicely. Let me go and check. Yep, that looks nice. So that is done. Again, you can see how quick that was. Let's scale them down, move them over here, and let's do the same thing here. I'm going to select all the faces, come over to the other side, and let's select the few faces that I missed. This one, that one, go all the way down. This one, that one, and a couple more. This one and that one. And let's reproject. Go to create planar. It's going to be still on X. Let's hit 6 so I can see my texture, my UV grid. Let's go to UVs, select just the top ones, and unfold along V. And let's scale this down. And it's going to be right there. And let's do the one in the back. Now I can just simply select, let me go back to shader mode, and I'm just going to select this face right here, this one, paint the selection all the way down, select this one and this one, and this is going to be the back. Back is very simple, and I'm going to project it on Z. Create planar projection option, Z project. And that's it. That's it for that one. I just need to flip it. I'm gonna hit 6, take a look. Move it around. I grabbed everything I needed. And go to modify and flip. And these faces should only be the ones in the front. So everything that's inside 0 to 1 space should be only for the front. So if I take these, move them, if I go into the perspective viewport with all the faces selected that I need to UV, if I drag them out and around, this is a way for me to check that I didn't leave one of the small faces somewhere UV'd on the other pieces, or maybe there's a floating face that I forgot to attach to. So this is kind of a way that I can check by selecting the faces inside the UV editor that I need to UV that I know only belong to the front. And inside the perspective viewport, actually just move them around. And if I happen to have a face somewhere, you would see it being pulled from the back or top or the sides. And you would know that that one face just happens to be maybe not attached to the other shells, and it should have been. So in this case, everything is just for the front. So with all those faces selected, let's project them, and project them on Z. Create and project. Planar, project. All right, so most of these should be okay, with the exception of the ones on the inside. There is a face right here that I don't think I want to be attached, but it's going to be inside this divot, this kind of interior bevel, and then that stretching right here that's going to be created may not be that visible. So I want to see if I just unfold as is, if I can just unfold some of these pieces on the inside. So let me try just double clicking on and selecting all the UVs and just trying to unfold on this entire piece. See what happens. And that is actually not bad. Just slight stretching over here, which is not going to be seen. But everything else, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to keep this. Let me select one of the edges and I'm going to orient my shells to edges so it's straight. And just take a look at it. Yep, that is good. All right. That shell is complete. All right, so our next step is to get everything inside in 0 to 1 space. So we need to do our layout. So this is the important part, placing everything inside this square right here. Everything else is just a working area. I need to go ahead and select everything that I have. I'm not going to combine it yet, but I do want to lay them out together as if they are combined. So in order to see all the UVs inside, for you to lay them out, just select all the objects that are going to be together. Next, I want to set everything to the same textile density. So I need to select all the UVs. And we can do this one at a time, and I usually prefer this one at a time. However, you can do this all together. When you do this all together, the shells will split up all over the place. So it may kind of mess up your organization that you're trying to maintain. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select them and see what happens when I do them all together. All the UVs selected, you go to transform. And under tools, you are going to see textile density. And I'm going to just input a number here, just any number. This will set every single UV shell to the same textile density. So nothing's going to be bigger than the other. They'll all be maintained the same texture resolution and same amount of detail between each UV shell. So let me type in 1 and click set. All right, so see how everything kind of got broken up. So I would just need to place them back together. However, I can do this a little bit more manually. So I'll just scale everything down, position where everything needs to go. And I'll just deal with this more on a one-by-one basis. So I'll select this shell right here, and I'm going to come down to the textile density. I'm going to click get. It's going to collect the number for what the textile density for that shell. Then I'm going to double click on another shell and click set. So it's going to match it to the one that I got the information from. Let me move these out, and I'm going to do this to every shell. Click get. So that's going to be, that's the top. Let's click get for this. I mean set, because I already got the number, so I'm just gonna click set and everything. And for that shell, I'll just rotate this one. That's gonna be going on the bottom. Actually, I can actually scale this down because nobody's gonna be seen on the bottom. So for that shell, I can really scale it down and maybe position it right there to kind of save a little bit more space for me for important areas. Unless this file cabinet is going to be sideways. So it might, so I'll just keep it as is. So it's the same. For this one, let's flip it. And let's continue doing this for all of the shells. I'll select these and I'll click set. Now for these, I do want to maybe, so I'll have this open space right here. Maybe I will, because I'm going to be duplicating a lot of these shells together, I'll probably put them inside this area right here for all 4. So this way, at least I maximize the space that I have. So I'll keep that for now. Let me just continue getting set for everything. So this one, that's the drawer. That's the second drawer. That's the third one. And that's the fourth one. This one, let's click set. And this is the back set. All right, and these, let's deal just with the handle, which is this part right here. Click set, and click set. Now these are going to be very small, so I could probably just scale them out a little bit in order to give them a little bit more texture resolution. And they're going to be going to the top. Not too much. I don't want them to stand out, but maybe a little bit more than what they are. Yeah, it's okay to do that. And let's do the same thing for all these pieces. So I'm going to select all the UVs and click set. Same thing here, click set. Now I do prefer to do this manually because this way I have full control. I know where the shells are going to be going. I can position them. It does take a little bit longer than usual because you are doing this by hand. There's an option to do this automatically and just tell Maya to set textile density for everything is the same and position everything inside 0 to 1 space by going to modify and working the layout options right here and just working through this option. You can define padding, you can define resolution and so on, but that does it automatically. And in certain situations that would be fine. But just for this video I wanted to do it manually to show it to you. I'll scale this out as well. And I do prefer the more manual method because you have more direct control. Alright, so now I just need to position everything inside 0 to 1 space. So in this case I need to select everything. And I may need to scale all the shells down together and just find how I can fit all these shells, maximizing the 0 to 1 space as much as possible. So if you need to scale up or down, you can do so, just do it all together. So let's flip this shell. So in this situation, it becomes more like Tetris. You are trying to find the best possible position for all these shells. So maybe that one right there. Let's position this one. I want to avoid overlapping any UV shells. Let's move this one over here, which this one is the side. Yep. So I want to give unique UV space for each shell. And actually that turned out pretty well. I can probably scale this slightly higher, just a little bit. And that looks good. Let's select these two, move them out. I have a little bit of empty space, but that's fine. And that is good. Everything inside 0 to 1 space. And the last step is to select these pieces right here and then duplicate them. Position them down And then I'm going to move those UVs down the stack into each area of the interior. So that way they also have their own UV space. So let's do that. I'm going to select these. Let's go to front view. So that way I can Shift D, duplicate them, move them down right about there. And I get very similar distance from the top. Right about there. And then Shift D again. And then Shift D again. Take a look at the perspective view. Hit 5 for shaded mode. Take a look if they're all kind of similar distance. They look like they are. And then I'm just gonna select them all. And actually, let's select these two. And these are the UVs I need to move down. So I'm gonna select the file cabinet. Take all these UVs that I have in here. Move them down. Then select these UVs with the file cabinet so I can see all the UVs. Select all of these and move them down to the third one. And do the same thing for this. And move these UVs down to the very bottom. So now, if I select everything, they all occupy their own UV space. This is a nice, clean, organized layout. And few last things. So let's go ahead and select everything that I have. I can now go ahead and combine everything as one object. Let's go to Mesh and Combine. This is now one single filing cabinet. And all the UVs are attached together. I can now leave the UV editing mode back to Maya Classic. Let's delete history. Built up quite a stack here. I'm gonna name this. Name it File Cabinet. And let's modify a pivot point. I want it to be on the bottom. I haven't moved this file cabinet from the very beginning and I already had my pivot point perfectly on the bottom. So I'll just snap it to the grid, to the world origin. That's where it's going to be. That's where my pivot point for this object will be. So I'm going to hold down D, X, middle mouse click and drag, snap it. And that is it. If for some reason you need to collect a UV layout, you can do so in the UV editor. Select the object, go to Image, UV Snapshot. Define where you would want to save this UV layout, this image, with all the UVs in there. Give it size, resolution, image format, JPEG, and you would save it and you could have this layout if you needed it for some reason. Let's finish things up by taking this out of Maya and texturing it in Painter. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the file cabinet and we're gonna export it as an FBX. I'm gonna go to File, Export Selection, and under Geometry, in Options, I'm gonna make sure I have Smoothing Groups and Smooth Mesh enabled. These are the same options I use when I export for UE4, and they also seem to work in Painter. So I'm gonna give it a name and export it somewhere that I can find it. And I already have an export folder right here. I'm just going to put it right there and export selection. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to Painter. Let's create a new project. Go to File, New, and for the template, I'm going to use PBR Metallic Roughness Alpha Blend. Under File, you select the FBX that you exported. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my FBX, which is right here, and let's use that. For document resolution, I'm going to go up to 2K texture, and you can always change this at any time, as well as during the export. And everything else I'm going to keep the same, and click OK. All right, here we are. We imported our mesh right in here. So the first thing you need to do is you need to bake your meshes, bake maps for them, right in here, right inside Substance. So go to Texture Set Settings, scroll down, and you're going to see this Mesh Maps. And you need to do this so Painter can calculate and take a look at your mesh and generate important parts of the textures that will be used to paint. So go ahead and bake mesh maps. For the settings here, the only thing I'm going to choose is the output size to the same output size that I have, that I set prior to importing the mesh. So 2048, 2K. And I'm going to leave everything in here which maps to bake at default. I'm not going to change anything. And then go ahead and bake selected textures. And you will see a difference after it's baked. You will actually see a difference in the preview of your mesh in Painter. Here we are, click OK. And it is already looking better. We have some ambient occlusion and it's looking nice. All right. So for texture in this cabinet, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to go through and spend too much time here. I just want to apply a few materials, tweak a few properties, and then generate my textures to use. So I am going to utilize Smart Materials. These are presets that have been given and created for you by Substance, and they just allow you to very quickly to start texturing and create something. So that's what I'm going to utilize. And we'll do a few tweaks here and there. So to apply a Smart Material, I'm going to go back to layers. And I have a layer 1, which is an empty layer. You can go ahead and delete it. I'm going to delete mine. And I'm going to come over here to the shelf and click on the second icon, which are Smart Materials. And there's a lot here. And I already know which one I'm going to use. And for the main cabinet, I'm going to use Steel Painted Stained. And it's going to be right down here in the bottom. Right here. Not this one. Steel Painted. Right here. Steel Painted Stained. So left click, hold and drag right over your mesh and apply it. Or you can just even drag it right into the layers palette right here on the right. So either one will work. I'll drop it on top of the mesh. So this applies the Smart Material of the Steel Painted Stained. And I'm just going to take a look at it, what it looks like. And again, right away, it already looks pretty good. It has a roughness. It has a base color. A little bit of height or normal map applied to it. So it's looking pretty good already. The detail right here, the little edges and scratches, that's repeating a little bit too much. So I'm going to tone that down, as well as I'm going to change the color of this. So I'm going to reposition my light by holding down Shift and right click, hold and drag. And that's why I can check what it looks like, especially the roughness. And let's tweak a little bit, a few of the settings for the texture, and then we'll deal with the name tag and the handle and do another material on it. So I'm going to come over to the layers and I'm going to open this up. And you can see you have all of controls here. Again, usually if you're going to do this manually, you create these yourself. But since this is a Smart Material, it gets applied for you. Just a quicker way to texture things. When you don't have time and you need to get something done. So we don't want to leave it as is, of course. And so first I'm going to come over here and I want to tone down these scratches, kind of this repeating pattern of missing paint. So if you don't know which one is doing what in a Smart Material, you can just disable the visibility of it and it'll show you. And it is this edges right here. So if I turn that off, it removes it. And this is a nice clean file cabinet. So let's introduce it a little bit. So I'm going to adjust the opacity for it. So I'm going to just tone it down. And I want a little bit to show through. So I'm just going to tweak until I find something where I don't see the repetition. So I'm going to keep it about 20. And then I'm going to change the base color. I don't want to have this kind of darker teal color applied onto it. I want a more olive green. So I'm going to come over into the Steel Painted stack of layers. And it's going to be this bottom layer base paint. I'm going to select it. And then in the properties, you have ability to change the base color right here. So I'm going to left click on it. And I can just use the color picker, and I've already decided which color I want and which value for the color that I'm going to use. So I'm going to just copy and paste it right here into the hex, the number, and it's this color. But again, you can choose whatever color you would want for your base paint. Let's go ahead and close this. And here's what I'm going to go with. Kind of this kind of army green, olive green. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now let's deal with the handle and the name tag. For this, I'm going to use a whole different material, and then we're going to mask this area out. So we are done with this as far as the main file cabinet body. I'm going to just go ahead and close the folder. And then for this, I'm going to use another material, and this is going to be Steel Painted, also a Smart Material. So it's going to be this one right here. If you can't find it, you can always search for a material. So I'm gonna just search for steel. So it isolates it. And then it's gonna be Steel Stained. It's gonna be Steel Stained, not painted. Right here, Steel Stained. So I'm going to go ahead and left click, and again, I can drop it right onto the object itself, or I can just drop it right in the layer. So I'm going to drop it in the layer at the top. It's going to apply this material and override everything I have below, but that's fine. We're going to use a mask to define which areas we're going to apply this onto. So let's do that now. I'm going to right click on a steel painted layer and add black mask. So everything is going to disappear. And then I can select which parts that I want steel stained to appear on. And for this, because I don't have a material ID in order to select which colors or which parts of the mesh to apply to, I'm going to use polygon fill. So I'm going to make sure my mask is selected and come over on the left hand side, and right here you're going to see polygon fill selected, and I'm going to switch over to select mesh, which is going to be on the bottom right properties, mesh fill. I'm going to enable this, and then with the mask selected inside the steel stained material, I can just left click on the meshes and create the mask and reveal the material. Let's do it one more time for the bottom one and this one. All right, let's take a look, and that's looking good. Now I want to change the color of this, so it's not the silver, but more of like a gold yellowish. So I can do this by creating a fill layer. So if I go inside the steel stained material, I don't have like a paint color that I can change. So for me to do this, otherwise I'll just have to create a layer and have it be kind of applied a color over it. So I'm going to select the steel base layer, and I'm going to create a fill layer on top. Add fill layer. You can already see it assigns a certain color to it. Then in the properties, I'm going to make sure I only have color applied, and I'm going to disable all these other channels. So I'm just dealing with color, the base color, because that's all I want to change for now. So I'm going to left click, bring up the color picker, and choose a color. Now I already have a color, again selected, pre-selected before, so I know what color I want. So I'm going to use a number, and I'm going to paste it in here. It's going to be this kind of a yellowish gold kind of color. Something similar to the reference that you saw when we were modeling. And then I also want to control a little bit of roughness. So right now it's a little too shiny. I just want to dull it down just a bit. And for this, I'm also going to create a layer in order to control that roughness. So I'm really quick, I'm gonna just rename this. So it's going to be fill layer color. And let's create another fill layer right on top of that one. And this is going to be a way for us to adjust only roughness. And in the properties, I'm going to disable everything except for roughness. So only the roughness channel is available. And I'm going to lower this. So I'm going to lower this to, let's say 0.2. Let's see, 0.3 maybe. 0.25. So you can enable and disable visibility. And again, I just want to make a slight adjustment, so it's a little bit duller. So here's before, here's after. And that is it. That's all I want to adjust. Again, I want to keep this material, this texture process simple. Again, this is a simpler version of a prop, and it's looking pretty good. So we are done texturing. If you know about Painter, you know how to use it, you can go further. And you can just do more of different passes and custom paint certain parts, scratches, dirt, rusty areas, and so on. But as far as us concerned, with this file cabinet, I'm done. So at this point, we need to export the textures if you're going to render this somewhere else, in Unreal Engine 4, for example, or in Maya using a render, or anywhere else. Or you can go ahead and render this right inside Painter. And if you come over here in the top right, you have iRay. So you can left click on this and render it right in here. There's a bunch of properties you can control, which display settings to use, which environment map, if you want to see the background or not, and just a bunch of post-processed effects. So you can go through and have a beauty shot right in here, right in Painter. In my case, I want to export those textures. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to File, Export Textures. I'm going to select where I want to export those textures into. So navigate into the directory where you want to have them in. So I'll just choose this one over my project and I'll select that folder. Then my output template, I already predetermined before, but here you can change it for whatever else you need. And I'm going to choose PBR metallic roughness. That's what I want. File type PNG, yes. And then I'm going to switch over to Lambert. This is the default material that was applied to the mesh when we exported and when we imported. So this is kind of the name of the material that was assigned to a file cabinet in the beginning, which was Lambert 1. We didn't change this. And I'll keep all of this except for emissive. There's no emissive properties for this. So I'm going to go ahead and disable it. And I'll keep everything else. And then just go ahead and click export. And it's done. And here are the textures. So we have the base color, height, metallic, normal, and roughness. So you would take these and you would use them in whatever render or game engine you would need. And here is a test render I did in Redshift. So I hooked up a Redshift material, input all the maps, and I have a tutorial on if you are using Redshift. I have a tutorial series on that you can look for, and I'll link it in the video description that shows you how to hook up all the maps correctly. And the materials from Substance, Painter, or the textures look exactly identical in the Redshift renderer. And for this last part, as a bonus, let me talk about the scene that I wanted to create. So after we created the file cabinet and you watched me go through the process, I didn't want to leave it as is, and I wanted to use it within the context of a very simple scene, a very simple environment, and do a render of it. And this is what I ended up with. As you can see, this is very simple. I added an extra couple of props, a chair and a book. Then I created a floor, a wall, and I wanted to have the lighting do majority of the work. So I'm going to briefly talk about how I set this up and the end result. So the additional prop that I created was a chair. This is a very simple chair. Let's take a look at the UVs. Again, everything is laid out inside 0 to 1 space. I brought it into Substance, threw a quick smart material on top of it, and I ended up with this. This entire chair was created with just a bunch of polygons and then just a lot of duplication, reusing the same piece of geometry over for the legs. And I applied a lot of bevels to get a nice smooth corner on the end of it, on all the edges. The other prop that I created was a book. And I just wanted to throw some kind of a quick text on it. And you can't really read it inside the render, but that's okay. As long as you can kind of get a sense that this is a book on top of the chair. That was enough for me. And then the other two pieces of geometry I created were a floor. Let's take a look at the UVs for this. This is a tileable floor, and although it's not being used as a tileable floor, it can be duplicated and tiled, and it will be seamless. And same for the wall. The wall has a tiny little small border on the bottom that's made of wood, and the rest of it is kind of plaster, concrete surface. So this took me no more than probably just a few hours to put together. And then for the render, I created a small kind of blacked out environment, used the same wall with the border, and I knocked out a few areas for the windows. And the reason I did this and created this kind of encapsulated environment was for lighting. I wanted to introduce kind of a sunlight going through a window and casting some nice shadows on the interior. And the light that I used wasn't just a regular light. I used a dome light right here. It's a Redshift dome light and an HDR image to light the environment with. So if I open up the properties for it, dome light, it has an assigned HDR image. And here's what it looks like. Here's the HDR image that's being used to light things with. And in order to use this HDRI image and get the result that I was trying to achieve, try to get with the lighting, so I have more shadows that are self-occluded, I had to introduce a couple of walls. Otherwise, if I didn't have these walls of the windows, and if I just delete the walls, it would be just too bright. So just as a quick example, let me bring in the render view and just show you what that would look like. So let me enable IPR, and I'm rendering from a camera. So let me switch over to camera 1 and I'll show you how I set up the camera. So here's a quick render of the final shot. And let me show you what it looks like if I just happen to delete these walls and I did not introduce them. So it's still the same setup. Actually, I do have a wall here. So still the same setup. However, it is a lot more brighter, and the HDR image is has a lot more bounce light on the outside. So by doing those walls and cutting out the windows, I was able to introduce that indirect lighting and a lot more shadow in the area that I wanted to have more darker areas. So after I went ahead and introduced it, you can see it got a lot darker, and I still have that very strong directional light coming from the HDR image. So that was the reason for introducing the walls. And the reason I knocked out some of the windows is, again, just to introduce more indirectly lit areas that have more light. Before, if it was solid, it was just way too dark. Now for the camera, I just used a regular camera in Maya, and you could go to create cameras, camera. This is the one I used. And this is my renderable camera. This is what I used to set up the shot. And for the shot, I used a square format instead of a widescreen because I just didn't have enough props or enough interesting composition to include it. So I did a lot of tests trying to get like a widescreen effect of it, so like 720, but I didn't really like the composition of this. I didn't want to duplicate the same cabinet to both sides, and I ended up going with a square format instead. I think compositionally that worked better. And primarily for the light, it was very important for me that I wanted to get nice strong shadows and a very strong directional light shining, revealing parts of the file cabinet, as well as hidden part of the wall, the poster, and the chair with the book. And then I wanted to have some nice cast shadows from the chair, creating a bit of more depth. So again, because this was a basic scene, I wanted to make sure that the lighting was doing a lot of the work for me to showcase what would be a very kind of bland scene if the lighting wasn't good enough to light with. It wasn't achieving the results that I was trying to get. So you can get away with a lot by making sure that your lighting is on point. So in the end, I didn't want to just create a prop, just a file cabinet. I wanted to make it a part of just something more. And creating a little extra few props allowed me to create a very simple scene from it and push it a little bit further than just do a single prop and call it done. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial workshop, this kind of simple prop file cabinet, going from the very beginning of modeling to UVing and then texturing quickly in Painter in order to get the full process and the entire workflow. So I hope you enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.